Good evening. Welcome to the Skokie 68 Board of Education regular meeting of January 18th, 2024. Could we get a roll call, please?
Bill Jordan.
Here.
Joseph.
Here.
Monegro.
Here.
Ruffner.
Here.
Sturbins.
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Workshop.
Here.
Wonderful. We will now open our meeting for public comment. Do we have registered public comment? We do not. Then we will move right ahead to our superintendent's reports.
All right, our first report tonight is we have James Stenson highlights. So Dr. Humer is here with various members of staff that are going to talk about
We're going to talk about
I didn't want to steal your thunder by it.
So I will say we don't have any students playing ukuleles. Very hard act to cover and an art. But we are going to talk about some really important work. When asked to present to highlight something about Stenson, I immediately thought about some of the behind the scenes work that our families and maybe even board members don't really know about kind of the nitty gritty that happens behind the scenes at our school. And some of that is our MTSS work. All of our schools have MTSS systems in place and they all look very familiar because we work really closely together. But we're going to talk specifically about the work at Stenson today. So this is, of course, aligned directly to our district strategic plan, specifically around teaching and learning. The work of MTSS, which is our multi-tiered systems of supports, impacts teaching and learning in many ways, which we're going to highlight tonight. So a big piece of the implementation of MTSS in our building is done through our instructional support team, which we call the IST. And the Stenson IST team is actually here tonight. So we have Jackie, our literacy specialist, we have Janine, our math specialist, Jeff is our instructional coach, Ellen is our AIM teacher, and then we have Amy, who's our MTSS differentiation specialist, and she's going to be presenting with me tonight. And our IST team meets weekly, and we really plan how to build capacity in teachers and how to support them in their work with all of the diverse learners in their classrooms. And so also the IST, we do learning ourselves. We have done some book clubs to learn about how to help our teachers facilitate professional learning communities, how to be more productive, how to lead change in our building. So it's a group of people that really works behind the scenes to support our teachers who then ultimately support our students. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who's going to dig a little deeper into MTSS.
Great. So MTSS, just kind of in a nutshell as a definition, is this proactive and data-driven framework that we use to support all of our students academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally. And really when we talk about MTSS, we are talking about all students and all staff members because everybody in our community plays a part in helping our learners grow. This is a visual that I created and shared with staff at the beginning of the year. If you look up MTSS, there are lots of visuals out there, but I like to think of it as a diamond because it really is meant to service all students. And I think that this diamond helps to capture what it is that our district is moving towards. The important piece to start with is that green section in the middle that says Tier 1. Tier 1 is for all of our students. It services everybody in our population. And we ensure access to core content through differentiated practices. If you look at the visual, you'll see that the green section of Tier 1 extends through the entire diamond, and that's really important because the foundation of MTSS is really a strong core instruction. So we really think about ways that we can make sure that all students are able to engage in the work that we're doing. The next section, that light yellow and the light purple, are Tiers 2. And so when we talk about Tiers 2, we're talking about core instruction plus targeted supports. And we would typically think that this would be for about 5 to 15% of our population or some of our students. And these sorts of supports are done in the classroom with the classroom teacher. Throughout tiers 1 and 2, IST partners with teachers to think about resource identification, to plan, to work through different differentiated strategies that we can try. So we really get a chance to partner throughout those 2 tiers. And then if you look at the outer edges, we have tiers 3 in red and that darker purple, and tiers 3 are really for a small population of students. So we would think about like 1 to 5%. And that would mean anyone who's receiving a tier 3 support benefits from core instruction plus this intensive intervention or enrichment. So we're thinking about ways that we can really like specifically think about what that small group of students might need to either help them access the core content or to make sure that we're enriching the core content. Those services are typically done by our literacy specialist or a math specialist or our AIM teacher. Something that's kind of important to know is that MTSS is a very fluid and flexible framework. So we would expect a lot of movement because as learners are growing, they're changing, their skills are adapting, and they're thinking about new things that we're working on. So this model isn't meant to be what Stenson looks like every single day or even week to week, month to month, but it's really kind of this general ideal of what MTSS can look like, and it's a way that we can measure our progress and how our systems are working for our students by using this as like our background measure.
So we utilize professional learning communities to really hone in on this work of identifying instructional strategies, differentiation, and also tiering our students to make sure they're receiving the supports they need. About 5 years ago, we worked to start to really focus on reinvigorating our professional communities. Our grade level teams have always met. They meet when their students go to specials. And typically they focused on day-to-day planning together, sometimes planning field trips. But we've kind of taken that and kicked it up a notch. And our instructional support team has really built the capacity of our team leaders through professional development to lead PLC meetings where we're really honing in on instruction and student learning. And so our PLCs walk through these 5 questions that you'll see in blue. And this is really goes with the MTSS framework nicely. So the PLC as a whole is really focused on that tier 1, that green area, the core instruction. And then we think about the questions such as, where are we now? So we look at that pre-assessment data to help us decide how we're going to target instruction for all students. And then when we start to move to that, how will we move learning forward? That's where we start to talk about the differentiation piece based on the pre-assessment data that we have. And then as we move forward and we start to look at that, who benefited and who did not, we're starting to look at those targeted groups, the tier 2, tier 3 groups, who needs additional support to access the core curriculum. And so all of this work is supported through our IST members. So our instructional coach, our MTSS specialists support that PLC process. Our PLCs go through formal cycles where they dive into these questions multiple times a year to really strengthen their units of study that they're teaching. They may invite the reading specialist to come to their PLC cycle meetings to bring that expertise and that knowledge. Same thing with the math specialist. So this is an important structure that we have in place. And our PLCs meet weekly to walk through these questions as they're analyzing standards and student learning.
So in addition to PLCs, there are a few times in the year that are designated towards data analysis. So we spend half a day talking with teams about the data that we have after benchmark testing is completed and really thinking about what questions can we ask based off of what we're seeing. It's a time for IST and teams to get together, and we're able to really think about what instructional strategies we want to try and then implement them together. Our IST plan those times together, and we often come up with resources that can help guide those conversations. So that image on that left of the chart is an example of one we're using currently for our data dives that we're in right now to sort of think about how we can guide our students based on their growth and performance. Because we're in the winter administration of benchmarks, it's been a nice opportunity to think beyond just what the results are now, but also how that individual student growth is from fall to winter. And it's given us a better glimpse into sort of how students are learning and what pieces we might want to think about as we're looking ahead. When we're in these data analysis times, we are thinking about tier 1, so what's going to benefit all of our students, but we are also thinking about tier 2 planning, so that targeted instruction in the classroom, what might that look like, and how can we as an IST support while teachers are working through that. Another way that IST supports MTSS is through our strategy development process. So this process is an opportunity for teachers to reach out when they're noticing some academic or behavioral challenges that they'd like support with. To get that process started, they fill out this really brief form that we call the SOS form, and then there's a picture of that on the left there. So it just gives us some basic information, and then an IST member will reach out and we will start partnering together to brainstorm different strategies that we can use to support that student based on what the teacher has seen. We might involve other staff members, so our social workers sometimes will join us depending on what the challenge is. We have our ESL specialists, we have a lot of wonderful resources in our building that can help. We track all of our information using our strategy development paperwork, which is that image on the right. What's nice about this paperwork is we have these tabs running at the bottom so we can track things like data, strategies that we've tried, observations that we've noticed, family communication, and then our actual meeting notes. And having it in this one central place is really helpful for us to be able to reflect as a team of like what's working, what might we want to revisit, and what things do we want to consider for some next steps. I think that this process has been really well received, which is really nice, and it's used really well, so it's great, and it's been a really nice way to collaboratively strategize like IST and teachers. As we look forward and like kind of look at where we want to go with MTSS, I think there are a number of goals and projects that we have, and I listed just a few of them here. They include looking at MTSS through the lens of equity. Equity is something that's incredibly important to us, and I think we're thinking about like, is our diamond really benefiting all of our students? And what additional questions and what additional steps can we take to make sure that that's the case? Looking at MTSS through the lens of SEL and behavior, there's work being done to think about what does tiered supports look like for this side of learning, and how can we make sure that those supports are proactive in nature? Progress monitoring is really important in terms of understanding how our tier 2 and tier 3 supports are working for students. So streamlining our resources and really thinking about ways that we can use progress monitoring consistently and effectively. And then thinking about tier 1, because again, that's the core foundation of MTSS. So how is our standards alignment, the thing that we're all held to, working for our students, and that important work that Robin mentioned that's happening at PLCs with those questions of like, learning intentions, success criteria, how are we using those to help further our student learning?
And so all of our ISDs actually meet across the whole district, and Christy leads that work. And so the nice thing is there's great alignment across all of our buildings, including the junior high as well. And we're continuing to evaluate our systems, and even just within our own IST, part of our weekly IST meetings is like what's working, what's not working, what systems do we need in place at Stenson to help support our teachers and our students. So we're always having those reflective conversations, both at Stenson and then as a district as a whole, to continue the work of MTSS here at Stenson. So I just know that when I first heard about presenting here, I just wanted to highlight this type of work because it's kind of the behind the scenes work that's so critical to the work of our teachers and our students, and just thankful that I have such a strong team that is really valued at Stenson. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I do have a question. I was just curious about if this way that Stenson is modeling using the MTSS, like the SOS forms and these data collections, is that consistent across the elementary schools that everybody's using?
It is. The MTSS specialists at each school meet together to plan, and they've worked with Christy and all of IST across the whole district for 3 years now to create these systems and structures in place. So Stenson is not unique. It's happening across all 4 schools.
Cool. And is there feedback from teachers about how they're liking this new system?
Yeah, well, they definitely love the
Yes,
SOS.
definitely.
But I think they like the dedicated time for data analysis. So right now, we're all involved in our instructional planning days, is what we call them. We're all doing them pretty much this week. And it's really, we have a sub in the classroom. We have a couple hours of just deep dive into data, planning, differentiation time, which is really nice, versus the 45-minute weekly PLC meeting when you're just like in amongst the chaos of a normal day. So I know they really appreciate that too.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Robin? So, I was kind of doodling here, thinking that when I look at the SOS form and the kinds of opportunities for teachers to put input. It seems like this is very much case management approach to working with our students. And I wonder, it's a huge investment of time, right? And clearly it's appreciative for the teachers. I guess I wonder when I look at the second part of the chart, you've got the student's background here, their social work background, if they have speech issues, what are their IEPs and 504s. How does the ITS work interface with the work of these systems and these staff resources and teacher resources that are already in place? I imagine it's another layer, but in a case management approach, it's like all hands on deck. I was just wondering how these folks are folded into the existing system.
So
Does that make sense?
What you do at Stinson?
yeah, I mean, so typically we're talking about general education students when we're in the strategy development process. So once a student is going through a case study evaluation and receives an IEP, then they move to the special ed department, and that group also meets regularly, social work, speech, case managers, and we also problem solve. We actually met today to talk about supports and services that are provided to students with IEPs. So they leave the strategy development world and move to the IEP world. So strategy development is primarily focused on general education students.
I thought about when I saw the form, it has this kind of background on the student, and that's kind of why I asked about the overlap. So, okay, so it's really primarily for general ed students. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is there one last question?
Yeah.
When you're looking from a tier 1 and tier 2 interventions, what's the window of time you evaluate, if the intervention or support is working to move up to a tier 2?
Do you want to talk a little more in depth about that?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to thinking about tier movement, we're always looking at data, especially as an IST. We're thinking about the benchmark data, but also the progress monitoring data that teachers might have. The goal really with MTSS is that it would be this fluid network so that it's possible that there's constantly movement, but we do want to also make sure that we're giving each targeted intervention a set amount of time to see what sticks, what else might be needed. So I think at a very minimal edge, we kind of think about a 4 to 6 week framework depending on what it is that we're focusing on. But generally when we get the data, if we need more data, we'll do a further collection, and then we'll do check-in points maybe at our next IPD, unless there's something else that comes up in between where we need to pivot. But that's the nice thing about having this IST and also having the relationships we have with our teachers where it's always an open conversation. So we can be flexible as needed to respond to our learners.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And for example, one of the questions that was asked today in one of our instructional planning days was, we're looking at benchmark data, but it's does this reflect what you see on a day-to-day in your classroom?
Right.
So benchmark data is a snapshot, it's not all we look at. So we're also meeting with the teachers one-on-one to say, is this representative of what you see on a daily basis, and what data do you have from your classroom too?
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you all very much for your work and for coming out tonight on a work night to present. This has been very informative and I think very helpful. We'll be talking about MTSS positions going forward at our next board meeting.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
You are released. Enjoy the evening.
All the other schools stay. That's what Emily told me.
Leave it to the lawyer to stir up drama.
And to point a finger, right?
Well, our second presentation and our third and fourth presentations tonight will all be led by Ryan Barrett, back again. The first one is our energy audit and opportunities.
Thank you all for having me here this evening. I will be staying the rest of the meeting. Just to point that out.
It's always a pleasure.
So as part of the strategic plan that was officially adopted, I think in December of 22 and has now officially been in place for a year, one of the key objectives that is part of that is to monitor the district's energy consumption. So over the last year, our Director of Operations, along with our Buildings and Grounds Foreman, have kind of been monitoring and working with ComEd and Constellation New Energy as our gas company to try and, one, monitor our usage, and two, work with those companies that when they have high demand, how can we, as a fairly large user of energy within the area, help reduce some of their needs. It's very hard to do that with gas in the winter. We need to heat the buildings just like most homes do. However, in the summer, sometimes when our buildings are unoccupied, we can kind of lower our load and work with them in order to kind of reduce their stress level as well. So tonight I'm just going to go over kind of where we are, where we've been over the last year and the last few years and compare, and then kind of what we've done to look ahead at future years. So, sorry, cover page. So just to start off with all the gas usages that we have. So the first is Devonshire. I understand it might be a little hard to see on the screens, but over the past 4 years, you can kind of see we've reduced our gas usage overall at Devonshire schools. So we started off the light blue and dark. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. The light blue and the dark blue are the two lower lines on the left. And then those represent 2020 and 2023. And then you've got 2021 and 2022 in the orange and green, which are the higher two lines. It's interesting to look at this data because to go back and realize, okay, 2020, kids were in the buildings for 3 months, and then they weren't in the buildings for mostly the rest of the year. And then the orange line, 2022, where you see that big spike on the left, also didn't have a lot of kids in the building at that time. That's kind of when we were coming back to into the building. We did have a few students, but not very many. So you can kind of see the spike there. But what I want to point out is all the way on the right towards December, that bottom tier line is that dark blue 2023 line of kind of where we just ended. So over the last year, since we've been monitoring during the strategic plan, we have been lower than most other years at Devonshire for gas usage. Now, gas usage is very dependent on the weather, right? We usually use most of it for our boiler system, our hot water heaters. We don't use gas much often for anything else overall. However, in 2023, the average temperature in the area was 52 degrees. The year before was 50, slightly lower, so maybe a little higher. But in 2021, the average was 53 degrees over the year, so higher. So you would expect 2023 and 2021 to be about the same. However, they're, I don't want to say polar opposites, but they're much higher in 2021 than they have been in 2023. ESC gas usage somewhat shows relatively the same thing. We did have a few more employees in the building at the end of 2020. So again, on the right-hand side, you've got 2020, 21 really shooting up. Again, the average temperatures weren't that drastic of a difference between those years, but you can really see the last 2 years, the gas usage in this building has gone down. Now, we did have summer construction, which would reduce our gas usage in 2022 in the summer of this building, but as you can kind of see, it's really helped out over the last year as well. 20, Highland, somewhat very similar. 2020 and 2023 start out about the same, but again, we end the year, this year, right at the bottom and well below previous years of Highland as well. Highland does, along with Devonshire, have some older boiler systems, and you would think just not as energy efficient. Stenson's boilers are a little newer, using most of the gas, but overall a nice reduction since we've been working with the gas company over the last year or so. Stenson, very similar to the same thing here. 2023 to end the year, well below where we started the year off. I think that, could be partially attained to some of the new mechanical equipment there. It is similar to some of the schools, but it's drastically reduced compared to the last 3 years there as well. Again, not all the mechanical equipment was changed there, but definitely, the classroom units were changed, so. And then Old Orchard, relatively the same thing, all starting out the last few years about the same. It must have been really cold in February of 2021 because everybody's sweating. So that must have been the first polar vortex, or maybe the second and the third at all at the same time. But it's just nice to see again, ending the year well below the last few years. And really, I think this is just like a starting point. We'll get into some of the other, energy reducing and carbon footprint reducing things that we've done over the next few presentations. But just monitoring, working with companies kind of shows when you're able to reduce it, it does help overall. Then we get into energy. So energy is a little, again, I'm sorry for the low numbers, or the little numbers, but on the right-hand side, you can see a breakdown for basically the total kilowatts over the entire year. And that's really what I think is a good thing to focus on, because in 2023, compared to 2021 at Devonshire, we used about 100,000 kilowatts less than we did in 2020, which is about 20% reduction in 2 years. Again, working with ComEd, I think over COVID, so over 2021, 2022, we put in LED lights in the corridors and libraries, not quite the classrooms just quite yet, but you can kind of see a steady reduction at Devonshire over the past few years. Highland is very similar, not quite 100,000 kilowatt reduction, but a nice reduction at Highland as well. Followed by Stenson. Wow, look at Stenson. Holy cow. Now, most of the power was off in July during construction this year. So I would love to take full credit for that. And I'm sure Mr. Nelson would too. But realistically, when you're repowering a whole school, you turn off the power. There wasn't air conditioning for a large part of July. Now the difference between 2021 and 2022, I saw, okay, well, why did we go up? And July really stuck out in my eyes, and we had summer school. Not only did we have summer school, we had newcomer summer school, so kids were there all day. And we didn't really have a lot of opportunities that July to really reduce the amount of energy, just more people in the building. We'd like to keep it comfortable for our students and teachers, especially when they're coming in on days they don't have to. So, but overall, I expect them to slightly grow a little next year because there will be some usage in July, but overall, much lower than in previous years. Old Orchard and ESC is fairly similar. In 2022, there was a raise. I think that could be partially due to construction on this building. They still had the energy on and the air running to make sure that the air conditioning was working. I remember doing walkthroughs and it was freezing in this building because none of the ceilings were in, so the air was just blasting all over the place. And the ESC staff was over at Old Orchard, again, want to make it comfortable for the ESC staff while they're there, kind of outplaced for the summer. But again, in a regular summer, a regular year in 2023, a nice drop back into reality. Old Orchard is older, it's bigger, it's always going to have more energy consumption. Again, most of the systems over there are a little older as well, but that just comes with the territory. we know doing this audit that, a major pull of electricity is the lights, the air conditioning, most of the pull of gas is the boiler system, and those are things that, my dad used to say, close the door, we're not air conditioning outside. Well, he wasn't wrong. For somebody who pays the bills now, I say the same thing to my children. But, we know that those systems take on the big loads. And we know changing, what's the board has approved and fully backed the reduction of energy and reducing our carbon footprint. With the geothermal system, I expect, especially Devonshire next fall to drop drastically, and Highland the year after that. It should be major reductions in most of the energy of those two schools. With the additional roof installations and things like that, also kind of closing up our buildings, sealing them up is also helpful. But I think after looking at it for the first year and monitoring it, it's there have been improvements where we've been able to make them. So, any questions? All right.
I can't wait to see the results in a year or two after a lot of the decisions that the board's made in the last
Now-
6 months that are coming into play.
I'm gonna watch them on YouTube.
They'll be public, accessible.
This time next year.
I'll be there, ghosting.
So I'm just gonna stay up here for a little while.
As you see, all three of these presentations have a connection and a thread running through them, which is essentially our strategic plan.
So every January, we come back and present our capital projects planning for the next few years. We try to plan out as far in advance. When doing financial projections, I always look out 5 years. When looking at this report, I look out 5 years, but really no, things can change, obviously, just like the financial projections very quickly.
Question.
Yep.
This is awesome, thank you. I love graphs, and I'm really excited to see the geothermal plummet the energy usage. When you did with the building improvements that we're doing at Stinson and then Devonshire and Highland, when you're doing the energy audit, are you looking at the efficiency of the building itself? Like, is there a door blower test where you kind of see if it's sealed so that things aren't leaking like your dad said? Or what kind of other tests are you running to see if the buildings themselves are efficient?
We haven't gotten that involved into the tests. It was more or less of, all right, this is a good starting point. We know we have these other projects. We'll get into it in a little bit, but we've conducted a 10-year life safety study that we have to do, but obviously every 10 years. And the old one, was probably about 10 years ago. We weren't really sure, there wasn't a set date on it. And our architect kind of comes in and does some of those things, those fixes. We know, just our head custodians, when there's, a drafty door, a door's not closing, they're always well in line. We didn't have somebody come out and test every window, every, kind of view, where in the roof is the air getting out. So, we can do those things, but, as of right now, we were told our windows are actually in better shape. We looked at doing the windows, I think, as part of our
architectural firm we've discussed with our architectural firm thermal imaging, and that they have handheld devices that can go around where you can see where all those leaks are and see where those issues are. It's just the next step, what we're gonna do, next step.
Thank you.
Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
So part of our capital projects, kind of what we look at is projects in three different groups, and you know, I know most of you have heard this many times, at least the past few years. But we looked at our safety compliance projects, and those are really our priority one. Those are state mandates that we have to do, our insurance company inspection results, they're coming out Monday, 10-year life safety plans, and then student safety projects. So a few years ago, you know, we did fire protection at the Old Orchard. That was a student safety project, we did that right away, you know, that kind of was a no-brainer, let's get it done, get it in, get it out. Then we look at capital maintenance projects. Now these are really, you know, some fire suppression systems, roof replacements, things we need to do in order to make sure that we don't shut down the building because the building has an issue. You know, there's nothing you can do when a water main breaks, that just happens, that's not on us, that's outside. But if the roof collapses, probably on us. I don't want to have to make that phone call to Dr. Garwood, and I know he doesn't want to have to make that phone call to all of you saying, hey, we have to close the school today because, you know, the building, you know, the roof is so old and now there's a foot of snow in the library at Devonshire. We don't want that. So capital maintenance projects are really our level 2 priority and sometimes level 4 and 5 total levels. So, you know, 1 is obviously let's get it done right away. 2 is we probably should get it done. 4 is we don't need to do it right now, but it's on our radar. If we can, great. If we can't, okay, fine. But 2 is, you know, we need to take care of this pretty quickly. And then lastly are our capital improvement projects. Those relate to the strategic plan, curb appeal, classroom remodeling, all the pretty stuff that you see and kind of enhance the learning environment for our students. And those fall into our level 3 and level 5 priorities. So the level 3, obviously, you can put off a few of the maintenance projects a little bit in order to really enhance the learning environment for the students. Level 5 are, what's our big pie in the sky, you know, things we want to do, kind of coming down the line. So we have this system that we've been using for a few years that all of our mechanical equipment, flooring, lighting, building shell, basically anything you can touch with the exception of furniture in our schools is part of this system. And what we do is everything has a life expectancy, right? If you buy a boiler, you know, that's got a life expectancy of 20 to 25 years. If you repave a parking lot, you know, that's got a life expectancy. And we know every now and then, you know, every other year we're gonna have to reseal it. So everything has a life expectancy and a cost associated with that. We put in inflation of about 3% every year. It's been off the past few years, but we'll look at all of those things in our buildings, and based on the life expectancy, the software kind of spits out a cost as to what things you might need to replace this year, 2026, 27, 28, and so on. And it goes out over 25 years. Every year we kind of rotate, we move some of the equipment around if we know, okay, you know, we had a pump at Devonshire that was supposed to be replaced this year. We were able to put a new motor in it. It's not going to be needed to be replaced for another 15 years. We go in there, update the life expectancy, kind of put what we did, any serial numbers associated with it, move it on, so forth and so on. This shows all of the capital maintenance. It does not include any of those capital improvement type projects, but just the capital maintenance. So if we did everything based on life expectancy alone, nothing that's been updated by our maintenance staff or anything or kind of watch, we would expect to have to spend $2.5 million this year alone just on capital maintenance. Now, we have phenomenal maintenance staff that knows way more than any other maintenance staff I've ever worked with that can take care of a lot of those things. A lot of the life expectancy that we have for some of our equipment, we're able to extend because our maintenance staff is in there doing routine maintenance and kind of keeping up with everything. And like I said, if you just need to replace a motor and a pump, they know how to do that. Many other examples, but
we've done things like, for example, the roof on the ESC. We prolonged the life on that for a fraction of the cost. Instead of replacing it, we got an additional 15-year warranty when we just put a coating over the roof.
Right.
So we extended the factory warranty by 15 years at a fraction of the cost.
We recently froze a coil at one of the schools in our unit ventilators. Our staff can replace that as opposed to having somebody else come in and give us a whole new unit ventilator. They're able just to replace the coil and, prolong the life of the entire unit ventilator.
So it's correct to say these aren't, say, for 2025. That's not a real cost of what we'll actually spend because we'll be able to take care of a lot of that. That's an estimate spit out by the system on
Correct.
what it would cost to replace
Exactly.
those things.
Now, as you can see though, the high numbers, for the next few years are Devonshire and Highland. Obviously, we've updated Stenson. Old Orchard has had some updates over the last few years as well. The ESC and the maintenance shop, the same thing. Devonshire, a lot of those costs are the roof, which we have approved for next summer, as well as a lot of the mechanical equipment, which has also been approved. So that's gonna be taken out. And then also Highland, looking at the following year, will also be taken care of as part of those, capital projects that we're doing. And along with that, so like 2027 in Highland, we're able to kind of look at some of those things that include them in as well. So our priority level cost summary by location is when we bring in everything. We bring in all the priorities and associate them with each priority level at each building. So you can see we kind of came up with all of Devonshire, a lot of their maintenance costs over the last few years. Let me just go back real quick. So we're able to include a lot of 2025, well, all of 2025, 2026, and some 2028 costs into the thing, and actually maybe 2029 too. Yeah, all the next 5 year Devonshire maintenance costs should be included in this summer's project, which is nice. Very, very nice.
Because going with geothermal, we're not only taking care of air conditioning, we're taking care of both systems at one time. So
Right.
you're gonna see that cost significantly reduce in both gas and electric with that geothermal upgrade
Exactly.
system.
And the maintenance costs, just with, some of the lights, some of the, all the flooring's been replaced, but all the mechanical equipment basically is being used and reduced at that point. Highland, I threw in under priority 3 is the geothermal costs that we're gonna be having this year. The board approved doing the drilling at at Highland this year, just to kind of reduce costs next year significantly, so that's included in there as well. And then future maintenance costs is all the other costs from the previous worksheet, and then other capital improvement projects. Obviously Highland, looking at the following year, and then Old Orchard. Didn't we just redo that building? We're looking at new ECC in Old Orchard, which I don't know, so I added that on top of the other. I'm sorry, I thought that's gonna be bigger.
There it is.
Delayed reaction.
Thank you. So, that's like those costs. Just to review, things that we've done as part of our really capital projects. I mean, we have hit the buildings hard the last few years with some, major capital renovations and are continuing to do so. And the board has, really supported that over the last few years. So just this past year, Stenson, the HVAC system, the roof, a new HVAC system at early childhood, lighting at Jane Stenson, casework, redid the elementary gyms with some basketball hoops, redid the floors, which I don't think had been done since they were put in place. Restriped them, I think all the gym teachers are very happy with that. This year coming up, looking at Devonshire, all the lighting. Next year, fiscal year 26, looking at Highland, some playgrounds, lighting, and then future projects, Old Orchard. The univents are getting up there in age, there's a lot more of them. We've kind of mentioned to the architects, what are some other potential options that we have other than just replacing? They haven't really brought us anything, haven't really been too interested, because honestly, they've been focusing on Devonshire Highland and the ECC project, so I think, you know, they know it's there, so, you know, it's put a little ticker in their file, they know it's coming, but, you know, just something else that we're looking at. Any questions on capital projects?
What kinds of things are included in curb appeal? Is it grounds, is it building, is it facade, like how extensive is it?
I mean, it can be, you know, I think of just curb appeal as, you know, not just from the exterior of the building, but when you walk in, you know, what do you see? Do you see, you know, a dark lit lobby, you know, what does the office look like? You know, what do the classrooms look like? Basically, you know, are they bright? Are they clean? Are they, you know, we did flooring as part of curb appeal. We haven't done much exterior work because we haven't really had very many additions recently. So, you know, there's been some rock beds along like this building, for instance, and that's because we could never get grass to grow next to the building, and it just looked dirt and unfinished. So that's kind of a curb appeal, but at a very minimal cost. I think signage, we did the sign a few years ago. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you for what you
Not done yet.
So back to the strategic plan. Dr. Heumann mentioned it earlier, and tonight I am going to be talking about the facilities and safety portion of the strategic plan. So the goal of this facilities and safety is to pursue an exceptional physical environment that includes enhancements to advance creativity, innovation, safety, and sustainability while supporting the needs of all learners. Which is a lot, but again, that's why we're here, right? We're here eventually, you know, we're here to support the learners and do what's best for them. So I'm going to go over all the objectives and the key indicators as part of the strategic plan, to go over them and kind of see where we are on each one. So the very top one is to conduct ongoing assessments of district facilities and prioritize upgrades based on current needs. So that is kind of the last presentation we just did, you know, an ongoing assessment of what we're doing, looking forward, doing the energy audit is another one, and the 10-year life safety is the last one. That one kind of really incorporates, to me, a lot of the minor things that, you know, even myself and Mr. Nelson might not see on a day-to-day basis or recognize. But kind of bringing the buildings, I'm trying to think of an example of what he wrote, and I think it was, you know, an electrical box in the boiler room was missing a cover plate. Okay. Yeah. You know, does that really enhance the learning environment? No, it's not part of the learning environment. No student should ever be in there. But it's part of the building and securing safety and making sure that, you know, the building life is prolonged even further. The next is to research 21st century learning spaces and make recommendations to enhance learning environments both inside and outside of schools. Dr. Samajetti and I have been, well, she's been leading, I've been participating in the learning spaces learning team. I make a few phone calls every now and then.
I appreciate your help.
I'm right on the board, but you know, we've been doing that process from the fall. That kind of got pushed off at COVID. We were really starting the application process the week before we closed down, and I remember sitting in Dr. Garwood's office saying, okay, you know, these are the questions we're going to ask, and then
Was it?
Missouri shut down. It was like, okay, completely stopped things. So now that students have been back in the buildings for a while now, and we're collaborating and starting to not starting to redo group work and things like that, but really bring that back to light. So as a group, we did site visits. We did 2 site visits. We are currently piloting 5 classrooms for new furniture, 3 at the junior high, and then a couple elementary primary classrooms, which is really fascinating to see how the kids use things. One classroom has like a pretend fire pit, I guess, with some campfire with some logs around it. And the kids love it, and I think they can all sit down and read a book at the campfire, but we'll see how much. I think it takes up too much space, but I'm not an educator. The kids like it, and I think during the site visits, seeing students use the furniture. I think the best example Dr. Samageni shared with me today is in our first grade classroom at Highland. They had indoor recess based on weather, and they were able to move all the furniture to the side of the room fairly quickly and basically had a dance party during indoor recess, which they've never been able to do before. Just that functionality of being able to move desks not only for groups but also apparently for indoor recess, which is something that was not part of our research or reading on the learning team. Was a great little side. So also looking at new playground designs at Devonshire and Highland as we do the geothermal drill fields and replacing some of those, kind of enhancing the outside, adding some more green space at those buildings. Is again just kind of looking at the outside of schools.
I have a quick question about that, right?
Yeah.
So like when they're doing the drilling, is that when you're going to also replace the other elements that will be affected by it, or is that like the following summer?
For like the playgrounds and things like that. So the drilling hopefully it takes place this spring, and then so over time throughout the summer, this summer they should be replacing those playgrounds. The green space, just from prior experience dealing with Old Orchard, I hope it can be played on in the fall. We didn't have the best experience at Old Orchard. I think we put some people on it maybe a little too soon, and then seeds were dug up and it didn't really take very well. It took quite a few years, I think, for it to be as solid as it is now. So I would love for people to be on the green space, but the playground and the blacktop should all be in place by August.
Thank you.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
We figured while they're out there tearing it up,
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
let's do it, get it in, get it done. The next is to explore opportunities for tax breaks, state and federal grants, et cetera, to supplement the cost of facility and learning environment upgrades. We've been updating updates on other grant opportunities. We work with ComEd every time we do lights. We get a nice couple $1,000 rebates from them. The gas company, we've done some little rebates. They might not charge us as much if we're able to reduce our usage. The past week I've been getting emails saying, high demand energy costs are raising for these next 36 hours or something like that. I didn't know they could do that, but apparently they could do that. Our new solar company can't do that, so that's good news for when it gets really hot in the summer. But ECC, we wrote a grant asking for $10 million, and unfortunately didn't get it. But working with Trimeric to kind of revamp a third of our costs for some of the geothermal usage is just some of the grants that we've been pursuing. pursue the construction of new early childhood facility center. We, the goal or the objective is to have an ECC program availability for all students, no wait list. Now, that is roughly 360 students. If you look at our average grade level at each school is about 60 students, or ECC would be 3 and 4 year olds. I don't know if we're ever gonna see 360 students in our ECC, that would be phenomenal. But our program is a typical early childhood program. It's just a half-day program. Some parents' needs are different. But the goal is to get to a program where we don't have a wait list and we have as many of our future students in there as possible. The architect came in June this past year, board approved the architect fees to kind of start working on that in October. Dr. Garwood, Dr. Savagenny, Ms. Jacobellis, and Mr. Nelson and I have been working with the architects. We've gone on 3 different site visits and have started designing the potential new ECC. It is slightly larger than what was presented in June. I know Dr. Sullivan kind of pointed out that there weren't any offices or anything else really in the design. And that was a very basic design of, we need about 10 classrooms, and here's a rectangle, of where to put it. Once you kind of get into the design, into the mechanicals, into the storage and everything else, there is potentially more square footage needed. So the cost is associated with square footage. We don't have any final costs yet, but costs might go up based on needs for just program needs that we see in the future, and in order to expand potentially in the future. If costs gets so out of line, I don't think it would be a huge surprise as Mr. Ruffer noticed how conservative I am with my projections in the fall. There might be different funding that might be needed just based on other costs and inflation, everything like that. But I think from what we've seen so far, the design, there's a possibility of expansion and just a really warm and welcoming opportunity for the board to have for brand new families to the district to come and kind of see what school could be like for our youngest students. So be prepared. Hopefully, I think we talked about potentially having a more detailed presentation just on that building sometime late spring, maybe May or June. Looking to go out on that building to bid probably next October, November, and then start construction in the spring of 2025. Look to break ground once they can break ground and know that concrete will set effective. The next objective is to continue to explore green initiative options to continue to reduce the district's carbon footprint. The first, what do they call it? Key objectives, key indicators, is when applicable, provide the board with alternative options for infrastructure projects. The geothermal, I think, is a perfect example for that. That will reduce the energy, hit a couple key indicators as well, and I'm actually very excited for that. I had a long conversation with somebody this morning just about unit ventilators, and again, just the geothermal system that only reduces sound pollution, I guess for a better word, but also I think air quality and is able to reach different parts of the room much better than a typical unit ventilator. So I think that was a great decision, and again, the board, when brought that, wholeheartedly supported it. So you guys.
Ryan, maybe your new employer will let you do a site visit one day back here to see some of those great innovations
Yeah, I
here
might,
in District 68.
Since we're gonna go to Jim's house for YouTube viewing.
He's gotta come back and see the returns on the work,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if anybody will answer the phone call. You know. Another indicator is to identify ways that District 68 can reduce the carbon footprint as well as additional opportunities to do so. Again, you guys, fully supported the solar panels. Should reduce energy costs overall. Will reduce the carbon footprint, absolutely. Will not reduce energy usage, right? But it will produce power grid usage, if you will, which is again the carbon footprint, which is really what we're doing, what we're looking for here. And then just monitoring energy consumption is again the energy audit that we looked at earlier today, which I think, right, easy for me to say, but should be, part of an annual presentation probably with the capital projects going forward. Last one. The last one is to promote a healthy school environment. Ways that we've done that are vaping sensors at the junior high to kind of reduce, as we know that, putting anything in your lungs is not healthy for students or adults. Gymnasium upgrades, putting in new basketball hoops, redoing the floor, redoing the lighting, putting in security cameras, and then just the building and learning environment upgrades that we're doing is kind of bringing in that whole wellness structure with the students overall.
One additional thing, Mr. Nelson, do you want to talk briefly about the new door locks for all the classroom doors?
The district just installed, they're called Nighthawk lockdown devices, and what it is it's a device that teachers can quickly barricade their classroom door. So it's just another measure that we've taken to secure our classrooms.
Right. So we still have the locks. I think doing all the research and looking at all the research of school safety, I think lockdown is still the most effective. I know there is, run, hide, fight, and other things. But so in addition to the regular door locks that we have, which are all push button in the buildings, so any student can hit it from the inside. It's an additional lock that does allow the door in case.
So it's almost like a deadbolt that goes down into the floor.
Right, stopping the door from moving. There is a special key that a select few will have at each building, but a regular door key won't work. You have to have a special device in order to remove it, in order to get it.
And the first responders, Skokie Police and Skokie Fire Department have all been trained in that, so that's important to note.
And the devices were recommended by both.
Because I actually went to a safety conference in Niles with the Skokie Police and Skokie Fire Department, and the one thing that with all these unfortunate school shootings that have happened, the one thing that hasn't happened is no one has entered a locked classroom door. So this is just, that's fact. So putting these in place is just another preventative measure to secure our students and staff.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question on the locks? For the select few that have keys, does the police and fire department also have keys?
Yes.
And it's a special device that will go under the door and somehow unhook it. But yes, we do have keys.
It's not an actual key, it's an actual
It's like a
device.
Easily.
I used to work in the hotel industry when somebody would have a lock on it and they had to get into the room. They had like a little device where you could go undo the little chain hook lock. It's a device that works similarly for our
Just wanna make sure that
systems.
first
Don't share too many trade secrets.
Yes, and that's why it's important that we went with that device, because that's the device that the Skokie Police and Fire Department have trained, and that's what the township schools are going with.
And it was, it took a while for us to find a device like that. One, That would work on all of our school doors. Some doors swing open, some doors have the closer on the inside, some on the outside.
So already had in at least a half dozen or dozen different ones to try out
Right.
over the.
Some we have sight glass on the side, so, and this one, at the end of the day, works on all the doors, and there's a device to unlock it, which on some of them too, if a kid went in there and used it, we'd probably have to break the door or the window and wait for him to come down, whereas this time, I'm guessing the custodian or the principal are gonna be the only ones with. Yes.
Can I ask an awesome question? So, first of all, I really appreciate, I was thinking, the cartoon bubble over my head was thinking, are these kind of recommended or approved by law enforcement? So thank you, Ernie, for that. I'm just thinking, are these devices, heretofore not accessible on the black market by folks? Yeah, I'm just thinking of, these are recommended by law enforcement. We know the reality that we live in, that everything you build, sometimes do we have any sense of that at this point, that they're as safe as they can be and as inaccessible to the bad people as possible?
Are you saying the actual device to unlock it?
Yeah, the ones that the law enforcement have access to and that the, building, principals will have access to. It's an awful question, but.
That's a fair question. I mean, we didn't get it on Amazon, we got it.
No, I know. I didn't mean to suggest that.
No.
But these are not intended to take the place of the actual door lock. I mean, the actual, continue to use your actual door lock, this is just another step, another device.
Another
to be in
device
place.
to kind of,
I
could you go online and if you knew the device name and, look it up and buy one yourself? Yes.
Well, locks and security is to keep the honest people out often, right? So,
Yes.
anyway,
but,
it's just something that,
Right, it is, it's just a second tier, again, the door lock, and, I think when we started looking at this, we told all the teachers, we had all the custodians go around and test all the door lock, make sure they work, don't just tap it, don't shoulder it and hurt yourself, but, test the lock and make sure that it works, and I think we found a handful, not very many, but there were a handful that, were just looser than the others. And that's nothing, and we never tested it before.
Sure.
And nobody ever told us, because when we do lockdowns, nobody ever goes and actually tries to get it. So this is just an extra thing that, I think, most of the teachers left, but, it should be easy for the teacher to grab, put in place while locking the door.
I think it's also important to note that these devices, in order to, like, for somebody, if they wanted to get that actual unlock piece, they're gonna have to get onto the ground and go underneath the door to lift the device out of the floor. So it's not something that's easily where, it's gonna be a quick, if they wanna go in and cause damage and that device is in there, it's gonna take some
Yeah,
effort.
this is a broadcast meeting, so we might wanna tamp down the conversation.
yeah, I was asking a broad stroke question about access to the devices, but you're right, I mean, even this latest research on the Texas shooting was that locked doors, just having locked doors, reduce ease of access. So I hear you, it was just something that I
mean, this is
asking it.
one more in a list of deterrents that, we have in place, and I always say time is of the essence, so anything that slows anything down, this is not foolproof, nothing is foolproof, but this would certainly be an extra measure that would be of great benefit.
I don't have a question about door locks. I have a more fun question. Thank you for the geothermal again, I said that before, but like that, when we're talking about things like digging up the, drilling in the taking out the asphalt and drilling and taking out the playground and putting something in, or the curb appeal, what outside or inside, will you also investigate other more environmentally friendly options for replacing things like asphalt or within the playground construction or the curb appeal or the exterior of the grounds, or replacing grass with something that's more water efficient, or when we're designing the parking lot for Old Orchard, maybe like looking at bioswales or other water
Removable
retention.
pavers or
All
something
kinds of
like
stuff,
that.
like we were thinking about all of that, 'cause now's the time really.
Yes, and you know, I've seen other districts do the permeable pavers. They, you know, my first question is, how long are they sustainable?
Right.
Can you still plow and salt them? You know, is that effective? And the answer has all been yes. Nobody has recommended to do that on like a playground surface, you know, at least something like that, but, you know, not to say that we, you know, we haven't really looked at putting things underneath the asphalt. We haven't gotten that far into discussions. For Old Orchard, you know, it's more or less just looking at the building for the ECC, right, the building needs, because that will affect, the parking lot. And probably restructuring a major part of that parking lot, if not the entire.
Yeah, I know we're
north
talking
side
about
of it.
rerouting the whole thing, so there's an opportunity to put some trees in there, like some plants and other things to collect water and
Right.
shield the cars and all kinds of stuff.
We are looking at some green spaces attached to the construction.
There's so
Yeah,
much
I-
grass that we could just open and put in something else that'll help retain water and last forever and be low maintenance or no maintenance. So.
Yeah,
Part of that building expansion is MWRD, the water district, and looking at, cause since we are landlocked, especially at our elementary schools, is doing things like you're talking about, the parking lot, the possibility of utilizing the parking lot as a water retention
Yeah.
area, yes.
Great.
Yeah, the detention pond behind Old Orchard will
Right, we talked about.
probably have to get a little bigger,
Right.
probably some underground, water retention, detention, potentially also. What's that?
And plants can help with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, when you look at the front of Old Orchard, right, it's
It's
big
all
green
grass.
space and a big blacktop space.
Yeah,
There are definitely, you know,
opportunities,
opportunities to enhance the
learning.
beautification and
Cool, thank you. It's fun.
any other? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Berry, for the marathon of presentations tonight. I have just a couple of quick little updates here. If you'll recall, the last board meeting, our audio video system glitched out on us again. Since then, our tech department has pulled everything. They have reprogrammed, rewired from the initial setup that the vendor who sold it, you know, how they installed it. So they've redone everything, created new controls and everything. And I know I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but it appears to be working well tonight, judging from the lack of nudging that I get sometimes.
How many viewers? We in the double digits yet? Just kidding.
No, we don't have the number of viewers yet tonight. Double digits meaning two. Ryan and Ben watch every time the monitor
digits.
technology.
Are we in the 2 digits?
So we should have that fixed, and hopefully we'll have clear audio and video going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You all know we had a couple of inclement weather days this last week, 3 at Stetson. So we were going to have our last day, believe it or not, on May 28th this year, which was a Friday. And that first snow day pushed us into June, so June 3rd, and then the second day for the cold pushed us into Tuesday, June 4th. It's now the last day of school. Hopefully that will be it. You do not have to make up the day at Stetson. School code is you only have to make up a day if an entire district shuts down. If one school shuts down for some sort of emergency or some reason, you don't have to make up that day. So at this point, Tuesday, June 4th is our projected last day. We'll see if anything happens between now and then that changes that. I was disappointed we lost our May end date there. 7:30 in the morning as Ryan and I walked into school on Tuesday. Ernie was in the middle of a phone call with the village that the water main, we had actually, our custodians actually found the water main break and reported it at 6:30 in the morning. The village didn't have anybody on staff in the public works department at that time. They weren't able to tell us until 7:30 apparently that they were gonna have to shut the water down all day. Which, by the time I got into my office and hearing about that, it was about 55 minutes before the start of school. So we had to scramble and get communications out. Parents were very understanding of the nature of the incident and how out of control that was, as well as the weather. So, I miraculously, over all three of those closures, 2 whole district and 1 in Stetson, I did not field a single complaint from a parent or staff member. So, people seem to really get the dangerous nature of the weather incident. So you can't have 400 people in the building without being able to flush all day long. So you gotta close it.
It's a good, and 2 days of e-learning, mild compared to recent history.
That concludes my superintendent report.
Thank you very much. All right. Our next item of business is the reading and acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion?
I motion to approve the minutes from December 21st, 2023 Board of Education regular meeting.
Second.
Joseph,
Yes.
Vandergrill,
Yes.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Servant,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshall.
Thank you. The consent agenda is our next item of business. Does any member wish to remove any item for separate consideration? Then may I have a motion?
I motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes, it's a long read, which includes the personnel report authorizing retirement of administrative staff, leave of absence and change of status of licensed staff, hire, leave of absence and change of status of classified staff, financial reports, pay orders and expenditures, and second readings of Board of Education policies 220, 200, 220, 410, 430, 460, 4170, 530, and 550.
Second.
Vandergrill,
Yes.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Servant,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshall.
Yes.
Jordan. Yes. Joseph.
Yes.
All right. We now go to our second readings. Or no, sorry, report and discussion items, excuse me. That would be you, Noel.
Good. Okay, so I went to the NTDSE meeting last Thursday. And 2 things that I thought were really quite interesting about that I wanted to share with everyone. The first thing is they had a presentation of the assistive technology team, which also does some services for partnering districts. So this is, in particular, they were talking about how a lot of special education professionals and even speech and language pathologists don't actually get substantial training in augmented and alternative communication, or AAC rather, devices. And so their team at NTDSE has actually been working on a variety of workshops to enhance the training of several people who are working in spaces for children who need to use AAC devices of various sorts. In fact, the workshops and classes and various other things that they've been doing, they do sort of a multi-tiered approach where they sort of give the theory on everything, they teach them how to use it, and then they give the teachers an opportunity to use it in a workshop, and then they'll go to the classroom and actually watch a teacher working with that particular thing and coach them in that process so that they're actually getting that training in the actual environment where they're going to use it. This has actually been so successful that there's been several other districts and states that have actually asked the same team to look at teaching them about how to do that. So it's evidently quite cutting edge the way that they're teaching various people that are needing to work with students who need AAC devices on how to do that in a meaningful way. And they've had really positive feedback from the people that have received coaching for those things. The other thing was that they had a legislative breakfast in December, which is something that NTDSE hosts every year. There was some difficulties there for the first time, where usually it's a really positive thing. So NTDSE is going to be started talking to some of the legislators that were there about what the purpose is of doing these kinds of breakfasts going forward, because there was just some unpleasantness that was not really the mission of that particular meeting. Beyond that, the partnership that they've got going with Lurie's on audiological services has actually been really, really successful. They've had a variety of clinics where there's been 10 total students have been served by that new partnership, and they're quite thrilled about it. We had a report on the NTDSE Raptors from Molloy, who were playing against Cove, despite a lot of effort. They had a loss, but they had a lot of great things going with it, playing a second tournament this past weekend. I didn't hear the results from that. And then the last thing that Taryn sort of conveyed, which we were asked to bring to our specific boards, was some challenges they had with coordinating the 24-25 academic calendar, because they're trying to create a calendar for the NTDSE students who are going to Molloy that is somewhat in alignment with the districts that they're feeding into, so that you don't have misalignments. This past set of calendars between the 9 feeder districts, I believe there was a difference in start dates of like 22 days and end dates of 22 days. This has incredible effects on NTDSE students and staff, because in particular they have their summer school that they try to serve all of these NTDSE students with, but with some of the students who are in satellite classrooms ending super early or super late, it becomes very difficult for them to actually run that. So she was asking districts, saying districts have independence to be able to make those particular choices, but it would be really great if in future there could be some efforts to try to get those in alignment, understanding that different districts have different needs, but also those partnerships are really affected by individual districts' decisions.
So rest assured, we're not one of the districts that they
No, I
challenges
looked
with.
at the NTDS calendar, our calendar, and they looked pretty close.
Yeah, there's an NTDSE calendar, there's a guideline for Niles Township for creating our school calendars for this very purpose and other things that some districts have felt they've had to deviate a little bit, sometimes for construction purposes or other things, but it created a little bit more of a challenge. We are right on target with the guidelines. We always adhere to that. We seek to be good partners of NTDSE and understand their challenges in having to work with 9 different entities.
And that's the end of my
Very much. Speaking of calendars, shall we look at the draft of the 24-25?
So believe it or not, we're already looking at the dates for next year.
Sorry. Do you want me to really quick give the debrief on, I totally forgot about the IASB
Oh,
thing.
we forgot to add it to the agenda.
Yeah.
Can we? Is it permitted?
It's a report, we're not
It's
gonna
not
actually-
that exciting.
Yeah, I know. What's the protocol?
I totally forgot and I just pulled up my notes.
No, and yeah, we forgot that.
Next
We
meeting?
probably ought to do it next
Okay.
meeting, just not
We'll
that I
have
think,
to
can't
wait
imagine
a
it'd
little
be
longer to hear
not that I
about
think
how
anybody
when-
from the public would feel, a bait and switch here, but just,
Totally okay.
But, yeah, I'm sorry. I
I'll
totally
add that
forgot
to
about
my.
that.
No, I forgot to.
As well. That's nice.
So what you have in front of you is the suggested calendar for next year's board meetings. We've followed the third Thursday at 7 o'clock rule for many years. Every year I'd look and see, are there conflicts with holidays, or sometimes we move the January meeting back depending on where that falls right after winter break. This year, it looks like the third Thursday rule at 7 o'clock should be able to work in every instance. Did have a question about
What holiday?
Passover, because the third Thursday in April falls during Passover, but Annie assured me day 5 of Passover was okay to schedule for, so we're gonna stick with the third Thursdays. By school code, we're supposed to present this for some reason in January the year before, and then not approve it until April. So this will come back in April as an action item.
And we are compliant.
Yeah, I don't write the rules, I comply with them. There you go. Any questions about pattern? Anybody wanna meet in different days in the future?
We used to meet on Tuesday nights at 7:30. How does that lay on you?
Yeah, we were 7:30 when I first started.
On Thursdays
On Thursdays, and then we switched to a 6:30 for a year.
for a year. That was tough to, but when I started, I remember, you guys remember
7:30 was tough.
Tuesdays.
That was tough.
How did we survive that?
Appreciate the 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Alright.
There we go. Delete, sorry, I'm changing my calendar because I always have to delete the next July. Okay. All right, so that moves us to some first readings.
Alright, got 5 first readings. Following sort of our practice before, I'll just read the names off, and if anybody has any questions, please ask, and we can try to answer the best of our ability. Okay, so we've got first reading for free and reduced price food services. Questions on the mandated changes there? I mean, that's always the trick in most of these changes in the policy. Some of them are stylistic, some of them are optional, but the vast majority of it are mandated. There's legislative mandates behind them. The language is actually written by the press attorneys. Sometimes you might be able to play with the language, but you can't ignore the mandated aspects. Second one is policy 4160, environmental quality of buildings and grounds. Next one, 5200, terms and conditions of appointment and dismissal. 5210, resignation. 5220, substitute teacher. All right. Hearing no questions, that concludes first readings.
There we are. That takes us to our Freedom of Information. There was one request and a response for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period December 15th through January 11th. On January 8th, 2024, the district received a commercial request from data specialists requesting purchase order and vendor information. The response is pending. If there is no further business to come before the board, I call for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I know.
Brooker,
Yes.
Servants,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshaw, Bell Jordan,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Bonner,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, we adjourn.